chat, I got a great announcement. I have decided that I want to be a more progressive person. I want to discard all of my bigotry to become a decent human being. And as such, I needed to learn the essentials. The first thing that you gotta learn is the LGBTs. Every human being has a human right of learning that LGBTs. So your kids, before even learning the ABCs, they gotta learn the LGBTs. And the best place to do it, like the best schools in the world that will teach your kids, are the ones in Britain. So I encourage parents from all over the world to send your kids to Britain in order to learn all about the LGBTs. Now, unfortunately, when the schools need to make room in their curriculum to teach these important things that obviously the market is seeking, they gotta eliminate some of the more boring material, some of the more boring subjects. So, you will never learn about this in school. I don't think anywhere from first grade all the way up until high school, and even if you decide to do certain universities, you will never learn about what the government does with the taxpayer money. Because the government, especially in Britain, I understand it's starving for taxes. Look here, farmers have hoarded land for too long, right? Inheritance tax. So, the British government is incredibly poor right now. They're reaching into their pockets and there's no more money left, so they have to take from someone else. And the question is, well, what did you do with the money? And here you have a farmer explaining some of the ways that the government are willing to spend these resources.
The next thing I'm going to tell you is unreal, because now we've been offered £2,500 to join a scheme for 3 years, and we don't supply you any food. Now listen.
This is actually very common in the European Union. A lot of people that like the EU do not know about this, but yeah, as a farmer, you have access to EU grants, and they're very profitable, they're very enticing, but they also have a lot of drawbacks. However, if you do take the grant, if you do take the loan, you have certain obligations. And this farmer probably is talking about a similar scheme where you take the money, right? You take £2,500, and in exchange, you can't do with your land what you would normally do. You have to now follow certain contractual obligations that you sign when you take the money.
We're going to go hungry.
I am going to plough a field. I'm going to put spring barley in. I'm going to get £440 off the government, right here, per acre, okay? That when it comes to crop size, leave it rot in the ground. So I don't get...
So just so you understand what he's talking about, right? The government is taking taxpayer money. I want you to imagine a working class lad that's toiling in the wage cage for 8, maybe 10 hours a day, and he cannot bring home all that cash to his family. He's got to pay the government. But it's okay, right? Because the government is going to spend that money wisely. They're going to spend that money far better than the working class man can. And the way they spend it is to pay farmers to leave the crops to rot on the field. Now, I'll explain why they're doing that in a little bit. But before, I just want to let the reality sink in. And this is something that's also happening in the European Union. But yeah, the idea that the government is taking money from people and paying farmers to let the crops rot is a thing that's happening. Again, we're going to go into the reason why they're doing it, but let's listen to the rest of the video first.
No straw for the cattle. You don't get nothing for your bread, for everything we make, okay? But I can also plant bee mix, which is for birds and bees. I can plant wild bird seed, which is for wild birds. I can also be paid to buy a ton of wild bird seed like anybody puts in their garden for the birds and drill it out on the ground once a week. I can get paid for that. Now my accountant says do it, because in doing that I've not got to buy fertiliser, which since the Ukraine war it's gone from £250 an acre to £1,000 a ton. So in order to fertilise your food, I've got to buy fertiliser at £1,000 a ton.
So basically, the accountant is telling him, like, yeah, that's profitable. I mean, the government is paying you not to work. Are you an idiot? Like, why do you want to work? The government is never paying people not to work. There's always, like, nothing in life is for free. And it's absolutely true. So why is the government paying farmers not to work? And there's many reasons. Some of them, you may argue that they're reasonable. Others, not so much. Now, the reasonable ones is that sometimes the land needs to rest. So the idea that if you use the land and you plant on it constantly, the soil... I'm not exactly a farmer, like I'm not an expert, but from what I understand is like the soil loses some of its properties, so even with crop rotation, it's just not as good. So like if you leave the land to rest for a couple of years, that's actually a good thing, right? But again, this is not probably what's happening here, because like usually the government may do this, but it's very limited in scale. Like you don't do it with all the farmers. What is more likely, and this is like EU-wide, is to fit the net zero initiatives, is to please the environmentalists, is to create the biodiversity. This is absolute madness. It's mental retardation. Because what they're actually doing is they're, like paying the farmers not to plant, but people still have to eat. So they're going to import food from somewhere else. Now please explain to me, how do you save the planet? If you're saying, right, we're not going to pollute here, so we're going to allow people to pollute elsewhere, and then we're going to import their food all the way over here. And if they're like for preserving the planet, if they're environmentalists, why do they allow mass immigration? Like, I want you to imagine a person living in an African village. How much can they pollute? Like, realistically speaking, like if they live in a modest house in an African village, right? They don't have a large smart TV. They do not have air conditioning. Like, they do not have the same amenities that people in London do. So their carbon footprint is relatively small, right? But if the same person that's living in the African village is now moving in London, and he's getting paid from the government, and he's getting all the social benefits, and now... he's living in a place with air conditioning, he's got access to a smart TV, he's got access to all the modern amenities that you and I have. Isn't the carbon footprint going up? So why is it that if they're fighting against pollution, why is it that they're bringing people to increase the carbon footprint per capita? It's almost like it's not about pollution, right? It's almost like it's not about the environment. So the question is, how is it fucking the farmer? How is it going to fuck the people that are dumb enough to take the money, the handout? Well, a lot of these farmers, they rely on supply chains. When you sell your food, like some farmers, sure, like maybe if they don't have a big enough plot of land, they can sell it in the local area, they can go to a farmer market or something. But like most farmers that are medium in size, they rely on supermarkets and other stores in order to sell their stuff. In other words, they're relying on logistic supplies, right? Like on logistic lines. And the supermarket, they expect consistency. Like they expect their shelves to constantly be filled. So if you take a 3-year break, the supermarket is going to do business with someone else. Like maybe they're going to start selling stuff from Ukraine, or they're going to start selling stuff from other countries. So when you're coming back and you're like, okay, well, I'm now willing to plant again, the supermarket may be like, well, sorry, we have no more room. Like, this is a huge problem in the shelf. The consumer themselves, right? Like for instance, this happened to Bud Light. And it's happening to every single other agricultural thing. A lot of people can be used to a specific type of bread that they like. Or they may enjoy buying their eggs from a specific brand. Now, if that brand becomes unavailable for 3 years, they will just switch the brand, right? So like with Bud Light, they just switch the beer to a different brand. And then they get used to that. So when you're coming back, you're losing the customers. And again, like, It's the same with COVID. When people were paid to stay at home, guess what people are going to do? They're going to stay at home. So if you're paying farmers not to plant, they're constantly going to stop planting. And eventually, when they do start planting again and they realize they can't sell anywhere, well, they're going to experience a little bit of despair one day. Because now they're reliant on the government and they're thinking, oh shit, I'm trying to plant, I can't sell anywhere, so they're going to have to sell their land. And of course, the government, by doing this, they're manipulating the markets, they're manipulating the prices, the price of food is going up, which a socialist government adores. Leftist governments, the governments that enjoy bureaucracy, this is what I mean by leftist, right? Like, they love bureaucracy, they love welfare, they require people to be dependent on the government. So when the person is dependent on the government, they will constantly vote for the party that gives more bureaucracy. Because they're in a situation where they can't help themselves anymore, right? Like if you're one of these farmers, that let's say you take the 3-year deal, and after 3 years you realize that it's very difficult to sell your food because all the supermarkets, like they started doing business with the competition, they're doing business with other people. You gotta sign for another 3 years with the government. And, you know, it's the ethics of it. Like, you're taking money from people in order to let crops rot, to have, like, this biodiversity shit, which people voted for Brexit. Like, this is another thing, you know, I'm constantly told, it's like, well, V, you know, isn't it dumb that British people supported Brexit? Because look where they're at now. And I'm like, well, yeah, they supported Brexit, but they didn't go for Brexit policies. Like, they left the European Union, and they are still following what the European Union policies are. So, like, how did they leave exactly? It's like living an abusive relationship, but still living based on how your abusive partner desires you to live. It's like, why the fuck did you live then? Makes absolutely no sense. So yeah, like, Britain isn't behaving more like America. They're not even behaving like China. They're like picking and choosing the worst aspects of all the systems. They're incorporating it in their country. And it's not for the benefit of the people, that's for sure. Anyway, it would be interesting if this would be taught in schools, wouldn't it? You know, like it should be public knowledge. Where do your taxpayer money go? A lot of people, especially Germans, I asked them a couple of years ago, it's like, why do you vote green? And they were like, well, we're disillusioned with the parties. Like, we don't like the establishment. And we like trees. And we like the birds. And we like the animals. And then I was like, well, do you like communism? And they're like, no. Why would we like communism? It's like, well, look what you voted for. It's like, I didn't vote for that. It's like, yeah, it's on their fucking website. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, I know. This is what you voted for. Unmöglich. Sure. Well, let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.